Okay guys, welcome back. This is Rito and we're talking about Warcry again. This will be a bit of a shorter video, just something I thought that was interesting and something I was looking at because, I don't know, I wanted to know. So as you guys know, for my tier videos, for example, I've done weighting for different abilities, movement, survivability, damage output, the model count, and so on. Um, Basically based on what I felt was the most important things, and then additionally based on what other people thought was important, I made it like a poll on Discord and on Reddit to get people's opinions and let me show you. This is what it came out. So this is basically how people in general rated these abilities. So damage at 30%, survivability 15, movement 23, and model count 24. Anyways, this is what came out. So basically, all very similar what people value, just damage a bit higher than the average and survivability a lot lower. Now, I thought about how to improve this thing beyond just doing what people feel. So I figured that I'd have a look at all the victory conditions present in Warcry. So, to do that, let's have a look. I can actually zoom in a bit. I was asked in the past to do that. Maybe I should. There we go. We're zoomed in now. So to do that, I split up all my victory conditions into different piles. I said, hey, this is a pile of victory conditions that basically are won just by movement. That's the first one here. Then I've had a pile which is compiled of movement and model count, so the numbers, like how many fighters you've got on your warband. And one that can be just won by having more fighters, one that can be won by having more fighters and being the one who's better at fighting. So obviously the combat prowess, basically a combination of damage and survivability. Then we've got just damage and survivability here, high fighting skill, and then we've got fighting and movement, which can, though, most of the time be substituted with range, which is why I put it in here, because it's kind of important to note. So let me give you an example for all of these. For movement missions, for example, we've got a lot of treasure ones. So if a treasure token is placed on the battlefield, and the fighter who holds it by the end of the third battle round, for example, that's the most basic one. This is mostly governed by movement, this objective, because oftentimes it will be the warband that has a high movement fighter, for example, movement 8 Rocktusk Prowler, let's say, grabbing the objective and running away, and then a slower warband will not have a chance to catch up and defeat him in 3 battle rounds. So very oftentimes objectives like this will be won or lost just based on movement. Then we've got movement and numbers. These are oftentimes things that have victory points. Victory points. And for example, who has more fighters in a around a victory point obviously takes the victory point. So if there's multiple victory points, it's very important to have more fighters and oftentimes also to have that movement. Now, quite important here, these are objectives with scoring. So whenever you start scoring from turn 1, then it's very important to have high movement and a good number of fighters, because that will allow you to score more points from the first battle round. I think if there's victory points, but they only award points at the very end of the battle, so an objective that says, hey, place 3 victory point markers and whoever controls most of them at the end of the 3rd battle round or at the end of the 4th battle round. That's not what this is, because then movement isn't as important, because all warbands will be able to get to the objectives by turn 3. So this is not what this is. This is about scoring early. And I think that's where movement and numbers are the most important. These also include things like where you have to have more fighters on top of buildings for each battle round and so on. So this is movement and numbers. Then we've got numbers, pure. This is the one I've got the lowest number for because I think how many fighters you have isn't the one deciding factor most of the time. Normally it goes hand in hand with either being also able to move quickly or also fighting decently. So I was only able to identify 2 missions which really only depend on numbers, and those are missions where it's about board control. So when you're asked to have more fighters in each quarter of the board, that doesn't require a lot of movement because getting from one board quarter to the other can be very quick. And it doesn't really require a lot of fighting as well because you can just most of the time keep away from enemy fighters. So having a lot of numbers there is a huge advantage because it will allow you to, after the opponent has finished all its activations, you can still choose where to place your models and get the higher number in most of the quarters. So those are the ones I use numbers for. Then we've got numbers and fighting. Those are the ones I've been talking about where you need to hold objectives, so where you need to hold points, but you also you need to hold them at the end of turn 3, for example. This is where you don't really need to this is where you don't really need to have high movement, but you need the damage output to pull down some enemy models. You need to keep your models on the points, and at the same time have enough models to contest the points and not just be overwhelmed. Because even if you are a great fighter, but you only have 1 fighter on a point and there's 3 planes runners around you, they will take the point from you. So I think these are that kind of category. Then we've got fighting and nothing else. And I think these are very simply objectives that do not have a fixed time limit. There's a couple of those. For example, the mission where each hammer has to be taken down. So it's just plain the warband whose hammer is taken down first loses. So there's no time limit, so movement isn't as important. Yeah, and there's really nothing a warband can do but to clash. They can just punch each other in the face, and whoever is better at that will win in the end. So there's actually 7 missions like that in the game, looking at the cards, so that's not too little. I was actually surprised. There's quite a few fighting missions there. Then we've got fighting and movement or range. Those are missions where it is time critical to take something down. For example, the defender has to defend his dagger for 3 turns, and the attacker has to kill the dagger in 3 turns. So in these kinds of scenarios, obviously you need to be able to have the damage output to actually kill the dagger, so fighting is important, but movement is just as important, because if you can not catch up with the enemy dagger, you're not going to win. And equally, if you have ranged, you obviously don't need to be able to move as much. If you have ranged, you can just shoot the enemy's dagger down in that case. So those are the scenarios that are fighting and move or range required. Okay, so splitting these up, so after looking at all of these, I then did a very, very, very basic calculation. I just said, okay, for movement, I'm adding the 6 points here to half of the points for each of the categories that have move in them. So 6 plus 4 plus 3.5. comes down to 13.5 points. Same for fighting and numbers. So as you can see, looking at all the victory objectives, movement and fighting are equally important, and then numbers are less important. So really what that means to my tier list, for example, and to the way I should probably weight things, is that I should maybe tone down the numbers a bit, although these categories in which numbers are important are still quite big. So, and this isn't a massive difference. So really, like, it's still important. Numbers will still be important, but I could probably like tune them down a bit. And really, it just shows movement is the most important, because keep in mind, fighting, obviously in my tier list, is split into survivability and damage output, because those are quite different things. Some warbands are very survivable, some are very high damage, but that doesn't mean they are, either of them is great in fighting in general. So yeah, I think overall damage and survivability should be a bit higher than movement, because it would be unfair to have two stats valued the same as one. But it clearly shows how important movement is. So yeah, I think overall I'd probably value movement even higher than I did. Probably tone down damage a bit. And I think that will be a more fair and balanced result. Anyways, guys, that's been it for today. A short one, as I said. I hope you enjoyed anyways. Let me know what you think about this whole idea, and see you in the next one. Bye.